In this video, we're going to see how to prevent and recover from exhaustion syndrome. We saw in the first video that exhaustion syndrome is caused by prolonged chronic stress. So your first prevention strategy should be to prevent stress. Stress arises, as we said, from your environment and the role that you play in that environment. So what you should do first is to choose environments, right, and roles that are less stressful. If you choose an environment and role that give you assignments that better matches your capabilities, then you are less stressed. If you choose supportive managers or a supportive peer group, then you can also be less stressed. Also, we see that the way you view situations determines whether you'll get the stress response or not. So we can see the view or mindset as sort of a filter. Something happens around you like a stressor, and the way you filter this determines whether you are stressed or not. So a few good way of viewing things is to have a higher purpose. I think it was Goethe who said, if you understand why, then you can deal with any how and what. So if you understand why you are under threat or why you take on a challenge, then you can better deal with it. The second is the growth mindset. Now, if you have a mindset that you put yourself in challenging situations in order to grow, and then you become less afraid of failing and you become less stressed, because regardless what happens, you're going to gain from it. Third is the Monty Python. Always look at the bright side of life. So this means that instead of focusing on the negative, you focus on the positive. Instead of focusing on the problems, you look at the solutions. And this help you to gain energy when you deal with a challenge. And finally is to have a greater perspective on things, whether it's spiritual or perhaps it's altruism, that you do things for a greater purpose again, and you do things for other people. Now, we saw earlier that people who develop chronic stress response and progress to exhaustion symptoms are those who ignore the chronic stress symptoms. So an obvious prevention would be to regularly recognize or early recognize, right, that you have stress symptoms, and you take a recovery before it's too late. So for this purpose, we have Karolinska Medical University who has developed a scale called the Karolinska Exhaustion Disorder Scale, or KEDS, where there is a scale from 0 to maximum 54. The higher you get, the more at risk you are of developing exhaustion syndrome. They have a threshold at 18, and the typical progression of somebody who develops exhaustion syndrome is initially they're okay, but then they have a dip, right, beyond the threshold, and then they ignore it, and they have another dip perhaps, and they ignore it again, and this lasts for a couple of months, and then suddenly they have this onset and they develop this bad exhaustion syndrome. So the obvious prevention here would be to recognize these dips into the risk zone, and you do prevention. Okay, and prevention could be to take a vacation, take a retreat, do something that you like, etc. Now, obviously there are some good habits, other than prevention, from these health checks that you could do. These are, to have daily regular sleep, you have balanced diet, you exercise regularly. This has proven to be very effective in preventing stress. You have smarter working habits, such as writing things down, prioritizing, planning, time boxing, visualizing and celebrating your accomplishments. And you have regular recreation. You rest 1 day per week. Perhaps you have a habit of meditating, or you spend quality time with your family and close relationships. Now, say that you, against all the prevention, you develop exhaustion syndrome. The first thing you can do when you have acute onset is to go to a healthcare professional who understand the syndrome. and of course to eliminate the stressors. The second thing you can do once you develop this is you allow for natural healing. Similarly to healing from a bone fracture, the way you heal from exhaustion syndrome is that you basically allow for natural healing. And things that have proven to work when speaking with other patients is that you meet with others who have similar experience and you can share. You do things that give you energy, such as hobbies. You do regular physical activity, which has been shown to actually increase your hippocampus growth, which has been damaged during chronic stress response. And something more interesting here is you practice something called mindfulness to help you reduce anxiety, and it's been shown that this actually shrinks your amygdala.